Leaders with less than a week left to go and a tightening race, they're running out of time to get their message across to Canadians. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was in Toronto today. He's urging people here in vote-rich Ontario to reject strategic voting as a strategy to defeat the Conservatives.
With the Liberals, they like to talk progressive, but they govern conservative. With New Democrats, we are always progressive, all the way through. We don't switch one way or the other. The difference is we're willing to ask the richest to pay their fair share. Mr. Trudeau isn't.
Singh is choosing his words carefully when it comes to a possible minority government. He says he's ready to fight the Conservatives, whatever shape the government takes. Singh also spoke today about his party's promise to abolish the Senate if elected.
There is now a clear choice between our party and an NDP Liberal coalition, which will raise taxes, kill jobs, drive out investment, cancel big projects. I know Canadians won't want that to happen, and that's why I'm very optimistic for October 21st.
Conservative leader Andrew Scheer is in Quebec. His party is hoping to make gains in the province, which would be crucial in attaining a majority. Scheer says if he becomes prime minister, he'll hold a meeting with premiers to discuss interprovincial trade barriers.
Do you want $53 billion worth of conservative cuts? Or do you want a progressive government that will continue investing in families and investing in communities?
Justin Trudeau is in the Maritimes today looking to shore up support in a region the Liberal Party swept in the 2015 election. He has repeatedly appealed to left-leaning voters, telling them the only way to defeat the Conservatives is to vote Liberal. Now, the topic of racism keeps coming up in this election campaign, but are the real issues facing people of color actually on the political agenda? Mike Crawley has been looking at that.
Hello, how are you? Good to see you.
Some of the biggest moments in this election campaign have touched on racism.
You should cut your turban off and you look like a Canadian.
He can't even remember how many times he put blackface on.
Yet neither Justin Trudeau's repeated use of blackface nor Jagmeet Singh making history as the first person of color to lead a major national party, nor Maxime Bernier's stance on immigration has prompted a deeper look at how racism affects people's lives.
I have to say that I'm very disappointed the issue around racial justice, racial equity has not been addressed by any party in any substantive way.
Why didn't that happen? Avi Go thinks it's because people don't like to talk about the realities of racism.
Conversation about race is often difficult in Canada. I think that a lot of Canadians still are not able to come to grips with the idea that there is a lot of racism within our country.
In a pre-election nationwide survey of Muslims, nearly 8 in 10 respondents named Islamophobia as an important issue.
I feel like this election was an opportunity for our party leaders and from all parties to address this, and I don't think that it's been done in a way that is satisfactory.
Ali Manik also criticizes the party leaders for not taking what he calls a strong stance against Quebec's ban on religious symbols in the public service.
I think that all parties have let down the Muslim community and ethnic communities tremendously by not addressing it more head-on.
Activists also question why the parties aren't doing more to tackle higher rates of poverty and incarceration among some racial minorities.
These are situations that people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I feel like, unfortunately, this campaign has failed to address most of them because we're a lot more interested in spectacle, we're a lot more interested in public embarrassment than we are actually interested in what is meaningful to Canadians of color.
It's a paradox, especially since some of the tightest battleground ridings in this election are among the most ethnically diverse in the country. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
And just look how tight the race is. Right now, CBC's poll tracker shows it's still a dead heat between the Conservatives and Liberals, with the NDP gaining ground over the last week. You can take a look for yourself at cbcnews.ca/poll tracker. Tonight, The National is taking their show on the road. Rosemary Barton is live in Burlington right now. Rosie, thank you for joining us. Let's start with why that city in particular is so important.
Well, this is one of those cities inside the 905 that we've talked so much about since the beginning of this election. One of those places where it is, there's a lot of people living here, and there are lots of seats up for grabs in and around Toronto, as you know, as many as 30 seats, which is more, for instance, than the province of Alberta has. This is one of those ridings to watch on Monday night. The contenders here, really between the Liberals and the Conservatives. Karina Gould, the Minister of Democratic Reform, fighting to keep her seat because when she won it back in 2015, it was a surprise. This is a place that tends to vote Conservative, and it tends to vote Conservative federally and provincially. So if we start to see some trouble for Karina Gould on Monday night, it's a good sign that the Conservatives are having a good night, and this is definitely a place that they need to win back if they want to form any version of government, majority or minority.
Now, the first week of the campaign, you were out in Mississauga. We were talking about the 905 then. I had a chance to say hello to the NDP leaders. He passed through our newsroom today. So it seems like the focus is still on this region.
Yeah, I mean, like it or not, Ontario has a lot of seats, right? 120 seats. And so you will see people here throughout the next couple of days. And it's also because as we see the race really not moving dramatically, Dwight, this is where the parties have to come to make sure they can hold on to what they have and grow. So the Conservatives and the Liberals very much still tied nationally in this region. The Liberals have a slight edge on the Conservatives, but because there's a lot of seats here, that might make all the difference. And the NDP support in this region has started to pull up a little bit too, but it's mostly contained to urban centers, like inside Toronto, of course. But this is a big part of how you form government, and that's why we're seeing so many of them come through Toronto and indeed the entire GTA.
You mentioned the tight races, and there's been a lot of back and forth about coalitions on this campaign trail, partly because of that. So how is that playing out today? It seems like some folks are backtracking on that talk right now.
Yeah, Jagmeet Singh in particular on Sunday was asked whether he'd be willing to form a coalition with the Liberals and said yes, and has sort of backed away from that notion. And that might be for the very simple reason that if we are headed towards a minority government, that does not necessarily mean a coalition, right? A coalition is a very official, particular term, which means that parties come together. There are members of one party that might be part of the cabinet, and that they act together through a period of time. What we might see is a minority government that tries to cobble together agreements on issue-to-issue basis. But no one really wants to be seen talking about that yet, because they all want to show Canadians that they still intend to win. In fact, you hear from Andrew Scheer today, and he's still talking about a Conservative majority, even though there's no indication that that's likely to happen.
Less than a week to go in the campaign. What should voters here in the GTA be looking out for in this election and on your show tonight?
Well, I mean, they should watch the show because we have a lot of people, I think, reflecting a lot of views that they have. I met a family in Milton yesterday, really struggling with making a decision, trying to do a sort of hold your nose and vote thing, which I think is what a lot of people are dealing with. Now, the advanced polls show huge turnout over 2015, so that's good. But people need to keep their eye on the ball and think about what message they want to send to their politicians when Monday rolls around, and it will undoubtedly be a late night for us, Dwight.
Yes, it will. Thank you, Rosie. Rosemary Barton is hosting the National from Burlington tonight, highlighting the area and issues that matter to residents there. You can catch that at 10 p.m. on CBC television and streaming on CBC Gem.
They're big, they're beautiful, and last year, more than a dozen people got stuck climbing them. So should thrill seekers be footing the bill for their own rescue on the Scarborough Bluffs? I'm City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly, and I'll have that story coming up.
We are learning more details today about a horrific hit and run that left 3 people seriously injured, including a 20-month-old baby. The driver has now been identified as a 34-year-old man, and police are on the hunt for him and 2 others. Farah Morelli joins us live from Pharmacy and Ellesmere, where this all happened. So, Farah, what do we know about the driver at this point?
Well, Dwight, police say that the driver's name is Derek D'Souza. He's somebody who is known to them, and there's now a warrant out for his arrest. Now, D'Souza is one of 4 people in total that police say are people of interest in this case. We know that over the weekend, one of them, a 30-year-old woman, Amanda Ryu, was actually arrested for something unrelated to this and is now speaking to investigators. But the search is still on for 3 other people, including D'Souza and a 49-year-old man named Corey Monroe. Now, to take you back, the accident happened just before 11 a.m. on Sunday morning, essentially right where I'm standing. We know, according to police, that a 2015 Dodge Journey that was gray was driving eastbound on Ellesmere Road. Police say it did not stop at that red light behind me. Instead, it crossed the intersection, mounted the sidewalk, and actually hit 3 people, a 57-year-old woman, a 37-year-old woman, and this 20-month-old baby. Now, after that, and keep in mind, they were on the sidewalk when this happened. After that, 2 people got out of the car. One of them, police say, fled on foot, and the other continued to drive. And it wouldn't be until the next day that police would actually locate that vehicle. And it was located almost 7 kilometers away at St. Clair Avenue East and O'Connor Road. Now, I want to pull up some photos that police have released here. The man that you are going to be looking at here in the black jacket and khaki pants is believed to have been one of the people who fled on foot. We don't know who he is, but police say he was in that car. And this next photo that I'm going to pull up here is of a man in a red cap. This is who police believe abandoned the vehicle. This was a few kilometers away, and this is all security camera footage that police have released. Again, we don't know who either is, but to sum up, police are looking for those 2 men in those photos and a 3rd person of interest in this case. Dwight.
And Farah, what can you tell us tonight about the conditions now of the victims?
So, Dwight, the 2 victims we know are a mother and daughter, and it was the daughter's 20-month-old baby that was hit. They all suffered serious injuries. I want to pull up a photo of the young 20-month-old baby. His name is Daniel, and we had a chance over the weekend to speak to Daniel's father. He didn't want to show his face and speak on camera, but what he told us is that his wife and his mother-in-law were sent to Sunnybrook to be treated for their injuries, and their son was taken to Sick Kids Hospital, and he is now recovering.
As bad as it is this is as good as it gets. He was hit by a vehicle while he was in a stroller. The stroller was a wreck, and he was thrown from the stroller in the collision. And he has a little bit of a head injury, but it's not too bad, and it looks like he's going to be okay.
So as you heard there, his young son is recovering. His wife suffered a broken leg, his mother-in-law some bruising, and also an injury to her wrist. He is now pleading with the people, the suspects or people of interest in this case, to come forward, saying that this could have been a whole lot worse. Dwight.
Really could have been. Thank you for that, Farah. 2 13-year-olds' lives are forever changed after a violent car crash this morning. It happened at the intersection of Dufferin and Finch just before 5 a.m. One of the teens was the driver, and the other, who was the passenger, may lose his leg. Now, Ontario's police watchdog is investigating after they say York police tried to pull over the vehicle before the crash. Alicia Hassan has more now from the scene.
There were 2 13-year-old boys involved in this crash. Police say they were speeding down Dufferin Street when they clipped a fuel tanker. At this point, the vehicle was out of control. It came to a stop after it slammed into an empty GO bus that was waiting at the intersection of Dufferin and Finch. The 13-year-old driver was okay. His friend in the passenger seat was rushed to Sick Kids Hospital with a serious leg injury. We spoke to that boy's father this morning. What do you know about his injuries?
They said they're trying to save his leg. That's what they told my wife this morning.
That is his car. He says his son's friend must have taken his keys from his jacket pocket late last night, and the 2 of them went for this joyride without his knowledge.
The key was in my jacket, in the jacket bag. I forgot it last night in my jacket. I never left it in my jacket. First time this happened.
I spoke to the driver of the tanker this morning, and he was shaken up, telling me had these fuel tanks been full, they may have exploded. Because of the types of vehicles involved, this could have been catastrophic. The Toronto police are asking for any dash cam video from this intersection at around 4:45 this morning to help in their investigation. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
A 54-year-old Brampton man is facing charges after a three-vehicle crash sent 3 people to hospital, including a baby. The crash happened on August 22nd at the intersection of Bay and College, and police say the man was driving a Toyota SUV and ran a red light, hitting 4 pedestrians. At the time, Uber confirmed the man was a driver with the company and removed his access to the app, but it was not clear whether he was carrying passengers at the time of the crash. Now, the driver has been charged with 2 counts of dangerous operation causing bodily harm. Selfie takers and thrill seekers, take note. If you get stuck on the Scarborough Bluffs, some city officials want to make sure you foot the bill for your rescue. City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly explains.
You can't miss the warning signs, but still, every year, thrill seekers get stuck climbing up or down the Scarborough Bluffs. That means emergency workers get tied up rescuing them.
And it's just person after person, and the wires are here. And they're stepping over the wires to look at the view.
That Scarborough councillor wants those daredevils to foot the bill for rescue efforts. He says the danger is well known and very real.
And you could be standing on an overhang, not knowing it's an overhang because you can't see the part below you that gets eaten out, and over you go.
The bluffs run for 15 kilometers, and the escarpment rises 90 meters at its highest point. Over the last decade, at least 2 people have died going over the edge, and so far this year, at least 1 person has been rescued. Last year was even worse, with 16 rescues in total. Those operations tied up more than 400 emergency workers who logged around 380 hours of work using more than 120 vehicles. And the cost of all that effort to the city?
It would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars now.
Sign-abiding bluff-goers don't seem to want their cash paying those bills.
And then it does cost taxpayer monies to rescue these people.
I think that's just not fair for people who deliberately disobey those warning signs, right?
I think it's legal for them to be charged for the rescue.
Meanwhile, the mayor says
the behavior is inexcusable, it's dumb, it's stupid, it's inconsiderate, but I'm told by the professionals that if you said to people one of the consequences when you get in trouble on the Scarborough Bluffs will be to get a huge bill, that may cause people not to call. And at least when they get in trouble, if they're that dumb, they should call and get help. You know, we just hope people stop doing it.
Amid all that debate, it'll be an uphill climb for the councillor's idea to get approved. First up, it'll be discussed at the city's Economic Committee meeting tomorrow. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
The bluffs are beautiful, but they can also be dangerous, so tread carefully when you're out there. Love the beautiful shooting, though. The leaves are changing. This is the time of year, Colette. It's very pretty.
Yes, it absolutely is gorgeous. And today was one of those days, very fall-like, but it's kind of the calm before the storm because we do have a system that's going to move in and bring some heavier rain. So that rain moving in overnight tonight, you will be impacted by it tomorrow morning, getting the kids off to school for the morning commute. You'll need a little extra time. Into the afternoon tomorrow, that will turn into more showery activity and become more scattered. But the winds will be ramping up as well, and we're going to see a couple of windy days, in fact, all sort of associated with this system. I'm going to explain more about that and how it's leading to a nor'easter for the eastern seaboard. That's coming up. For now, these are what your current temperatures look like. And, you know, this is seasonal. We're going to be a few degrees below that as that system works its way through, but not going to see a lot of change in the temperature, so it doesn't drop that much through the overnight. A little bit of light precipitation to the north of us, heavier stuff well back towards the northwest. As it moves in, there will be some heavier bands developing into the morning hours, though, and then we get into some breaks and it becomes more scattered in the afternoon, maybe even some sunny breaks in the afternoon. But even in the evening, you can see Wednesday, even Thursday, we still have some residual shower activity around. And again, those winds very strong. In terms of how much rain we'll see, I'll take a look at that, show you coming up. For now, know the temperature tonight 11, tomorrow 13. Dwight, by the way, this is also a very important day in Toronto's history. It's the 65th anniversary of Hurricane Hazel. I'll talk about that too coming up.
Yeah, that changed the city. Thank you for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
We are now just 1 week away from the start of another Raptors season. Of course, this year will be unlike any other because our Raps came in as the defending champs. After spending the first 2 weeks of training camp in Quebec and Japan, the team was back at the OVO Center today. Greg Ross caught up with them.
It was the first time the Raptors held a full practice in Toronto since the start of training camp.
It's good to be back home.
Fred VanVleet's sentiments are shared by many of his teammates who now have a week to settle in and get ready for the new season. The Raptors play their home opener next Tuesday against the New Orleans Pelicans, the first official game since this.
Canada, the NBA title is yours!
While Tuesday's game won't generate the same buzz in the city as last year's championship, there are plans for one more celebration to commemorate the Raptors' first ever title.
That's when I really feel is when the banner is raised and we put the rings on.
The Raptors have been very tight-lipped about what their championship rings will look like, but Nick Nurse says he has a pretty good idea.
I mean, those things are they're like pieces of furniture. You know, they're not really rings. They're so big these days.
It won't be just the team receiving rings on opening night. The Raptors plan to give replica rings to any fans lucky enough to have a ticket to be inside. And outside the arena, the team will host its first tailgate party since winning the title. And once again, thousands of fans are expected to be out here in Jurassic Park to watch that pregame ceremony.
It's going to be cool. I think obviously it's kind of the last kind of moment to celebrate, and it's a big one.
Two key players who helped bring a winning attitude to the Raptors will be absent from that celebration.
Is this the dagger?
Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green have both left, but the Raptors say the confidence and swagger has not.
Knowing that we know what it takes, knowing that we're good enough to do it, and you know, just having a different approach of attacking the season, you know, for the long run.
There will be more emotional nights to come. Leonard will make his return to Toronto with the Clippers on December 11th, which is when he'll likely receive his ring, and Green and the Lakers come to town in March. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Stop! Look, you're gonna hurt yourself. Michael!
The cuts have been devastating to him. They've left him truly at risk for his physical well-being.
She says her son was cut off from court-ordered autism services. Now she's suing the Doug Ford government, and she's brought some celebrity support.
The last thing these families want to do is to spend their time suing the provincial government. They've got enough on their plate just to get through a day and make sure their kids don't come to any great physical harm.
I speak with Eugene Levy about his advocacy for families with adult children with severe autism after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
The dust has settled after CUPE struck a last-minute deal with the province earlier this month, and now a union representing the secondary school teachers is looking to do the same, but they're being met with some difficulty.
It's somewhat encouraging that the government seemed there to recognize the importance of the services that these staff members provide to students. What's really discouraging is that they haven't responded the same way at our table. So they are leveraging students' educational experiences against our bargaining table in a way that I think should be really disconcerting for parents and students themselves.
The Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation said the union has been dealing with months of inaction by the province, saying they have failed to respond to their proposals, leaving them no choice but to begin the process of conducting strike votes with its 60,000 members. Voting will start a week from today, and the decision will be expected by November 15th. Actor Eugene Levy was out supporting his cousin today. Michael Deskin is on the autism spectrum. Michael's mother, along with a group of families, is taking the provincial government to court for cutting autism funding. And the actor is joining his family and others to support their cause.
The cuts have been devastating to him. They've left him truly at risk for his physical well-being because he is so self-injurious and doesn't recognize danger.
So as far as this lawsuit that you've brought now, it feels like you guys have been forced into this position.
Absolutely. This is the last thing we wanted to do. We've reminded him that our children are in danger, our adult children, and we've reminded him that this is court-ordered funding and that we have a promissory letter as well. We don't want to go to court, I'm sure, any more than they do, yet they will not bend.
Give us a little bit of the backstory here. How did we get to this point?
About 15 years ago, actually, there was a group of families, 29 families, who sued the government successfully because of a discriminatory policy that cut kids off from treatment at the age of 6. That got turned around, thereby helping countless kids in Ontario. Because of that lawsuit, a judge ordered our children to be funded on an ongoing basis. He's been reassessed recently as actually needing 2-on-1 support, so 2 workers with him 24/7.
This is about family for you, but you were doing this for everybody, not just for your cousin Michael.
No, it's for everybody. Believe me. 1 in 66 families are hit with autism. We are one, and there are a lot of people out there that know exactly, why we're here and how this is always seems to be underfunded.
And the government talks about money that it's investing in autism in the province. However, what they fail to mention is that it's for children. But autism doesn't end at 18. Our kids don't just fall off a cliff. It doesn't disappear. If anything, they get stronger, their needs become more complex, and people of all ages with autism need supports.
Do you wish there was some kind of national strategy for this? It seems like something is needed in this country, and right now we don't have a national strategy for autism.
Absolutely.
What do you have to say to the federal leaders?
Well, I think to the federal leaders and the provincial leaders, yes. I think that everyone needs to step up and recognize that this is a crisis in our country, and if we don't address this now, the problem is only going to get worse and people are going to get hurt. So I hope that all levels of government step up, and I hope that Premier Ford also recognizes what he's doing and makes right by our children.
And Eugene, you were adding your voice because you think it can help and help make a difference here.
Well, listen, being a so-called celebrity who has a fairly high profile, I can get my voice heard easier than these families can get their voices heard, and their voices have to be heard here. This is, this is literally across the country an epidemic, and the federal government to start forming a national program for autism, I think, is a fantastic idea. Until that happens, we would really love the provincial government to reinstate the court-ordered funding that was taken away from these families. That would be a great start.
Appreciate your advocacy on this and your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
We've seen a number of motor vehicle collisions, in some cases just stumbling into traffic to take that picture.
It is a gorgeous time in our province with the change in colors on our trees, but the rush of leaf lookers led to a rash of crashes. Can't believe I'm saying this, but tips to stay safe when peeping those leaves coming up. A crowded stage tonight in Ohio as 12 Democratic candidates face off, all vying for the party's presidential nomination. And as Lindsay Duncombe explains, this latest debate is taking place at an especially turbulent time in U.S. politics.
Even the closest observers of American politics could be forgiven if they've lost track of what's going on with the Democratic primary, because Donald Trump's impeachment inquiry, the inquiry into his behavior related to Ukraine, as well as the president's decision to withdraw troops from Syria have really dominated all the headlines. But while that's been going on, the Democratic story has changed.
We can't just have presidential campaigns that are financed by bazillionaires or financed by corporate money.
And it's a big change for this woman, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. Her progressive message appears to be resonating more with Democratic voters because she has pulled ahead of frontrunner Joe Biden in some key polls and appears to be gaining in others. Now, Biden has been criticized over not pushing back enough after Donald Trump's repeated attacks on him and his family, especially his son, Hunter Biden. And that's causing some watchers to worry about how Joe Biden would handle a general election against President Trump.
I should have listened to those symptoms.
And then, of course, there's Bernie Sanders. The 78-year-old suffered a heart attack earlier this month, and that's raising questions about whether or not he is up for the campaign or the job of President of the United States. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
Staying in the U.S., two top General Motors executives coming to the bargaining table could be a sign of a potential resolution to a month-long strike. Both the CEO and the president of GM met today with the negotiators from the United Auto Workers. The company and the union have not indicated if a deal was near, but say talks are continuing. There's pressure from all sides to end the walkout. The strike involving nearly 50,000 workers has paralyzed GM factories and other facilities across the U.S. It also puts thousands of auto workers in Ontario on layoff and affected Canadian suppliers to General Motors. The mystery is finally solved. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Remember the story about Monty the Python who went missing, was found, but that snake turned out to be an imposter? Well, the real Monty has been found. Where he's been hiding, coming up. The incredible autumn colors are drawing thousands of people to parks and forests across eastern Canada. But while a road trip is a wonderful way to take in the beautiful foliage, officials are warning drivers to use common sense when out viewing. Laura Glowacki explains.
This is how fall sounds west of Ottawa. In the county of Renfrew, leaf lookers are out in the thousands, hunting for the perfect photo and color combination. But while attention is on the leaves, some drivers seem to be forgetting the road. Renfrew's top paramedic says it's made for a busy weekend.
We've seen a number of motor vehicle collisions across the Ottawa Valley from people, not only those that are looking at the leaves, but people that are kind of half pulling off the road, maybe doing a U-turn after they've pulled off the road, or in some cases, just stumbling into traffic to take that picture.
Ontario Parks reported about 4,000 cars and nearly 24 coach buses along Highway 60 in Algonquin Park. And over in Gatineau, park areas had to be closed to manage traffic. Nolan says 7 people were hurt in 3 separate crashes in the Ottawa Valley on Sunday. None of the injuries were life-threatening, but he says some were serious. On top of that, there were several other crashes Nolan calls near misses.
An early warning, if you will, that with the change in leaves and the change in weather, we need to remind people to be safe on the roads and enjoy what is arguably one of the most beautiful times of the year, but it comes with risk.
Nolan says there are some really easy ways to stay safe and enjoy the fall colors. First, he suggests designating the driver to drive, so to pay attention to the road and not where the brightest, most colorful trees are. He also says to avoid any kind of abrupt stop that can be so dangerous, he suggests planning ahead. Look at a map and pick out a small town or a park to stop in where you can pull over and park safely, take your photos, and really enjoy the fall season. Laura Glowacki, CBC News, Burnstown, Ontario.
It seems strange. We have to tell people to be careful when they're looking at the foliage, but accidents are happening. It is beautiful, folks, but we've got to be careful.
Yeah, you sure do. Lots of reasons to be careful, too, when it comes to the weather. You know, this is such an important date in our history in terms of that. And a little clue comes if you have a look at our almanac for record rain on this date in history, over 120 millimeters, 1954. What happened in 1954? That's when Hurricane Hazel moved through the GTA. We have some images for you. In fact, it didn't just move through, it essentially stalled out. So that record is just from the one day. In fact, it was over 200 millimeters of rain that came in a 48-hour period. You can see the devastation here, massive flooding, the worst flooding in the GTA in our history. There were 81 deaths, most of those in the Toronto area associated with this storm. But I'll tell you something really important that's come from it, which is that we've learned to look at what happens with those floodwaters in our floodplain and try and manage them better, putting in some dams for the Humber River. And also so important, we had some small conservation authorities. Well, they all came together after Hurricane Hazel and formed what we know as the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. So all very, very important. 65 years ago on this day, it moved in the evening hours and began. Here's what's beginning this evening. We're going to see rain moving in overnight tonight as the system approaches. So towards the morning commute, that's when some of the heavier bands will be moving through. Going to see maybe some breaks, and then another band comes through, and then into the afternoon, it becomes more like some scattered shower activity. Might even get a few sunny breaks coming our way, but this is an important system too, because what happens is the energy gets transferred out to the East Coast, becomes a nor'easter for those folks, but keeps us in the wind path, and we have a couple of days of unsettled conditions with some scattered showers and some windy conditions. In terms of the amount of rain we'll see, most of this coming tomorrow, most of it in the morning hours, 20 to perhaps 30 millimeters. Oshawa, you may be on the higher end of that. Also, some of these winds very strong through the day tomorrow, then in the evening they let up a little bit, and then as we go into Thursday, they turn towards the northwest and become strong once again twice. So a couple of unsettled days, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's at the end of the week.
Perfect. Just in time for the weekend. Thank you,
You got
Colette.
it. You're welcome.
Mayor John Tory and Councillor Joe Cressy showing their support for the owners of Sufi's today. The Syrian restaurant closed early last week after receiving death threats and hate messages.
We are with you. We are behind you. This is not Toronto. This is not Canada. This is a tiny group of people who insist on this kind of discourse, which is hurtful and it's hateful and it has no place in our city.
The messages began after the owner's son protested outside an event featuring the People's Party of Canada. Now, Sufi's reopened on Friday after receiving an outpouring of support from the community.
So great, because they've told me the place has basically been overrun with those wanting to show support. Most of the people in here at lunch today are people that have come from some distance away.
Paramount Fine Food CEO Mohammed Faki said he would step in last week to help the family get the restaurant back up and running.
People in Syria, 400,000, 500,000 people died because they wanted the simple right of voting.
A dream finally realized. After the break, we talked to some Syrian refugees who now are citizens of our country and have cast their very first vote in an election. That story coming up. Some former refugees from war-torn Syria did something this weekend they never dreamed would happen. They cast a vote in a democratic election. Greg Rasmussen caught up with the first-time voters.
Raise your right hand and please repeat after me.
A transformation from Syrian refugee to Canadian with a vote.
That I will be faithful
and bear true allegiance.
He shares the same name as Syria's dictator, but this Bashar al-Assad is worlds away.
Thank you very much.
Well done, sir.
I'm Canadian now, yeah. Today is my first day as a Canadian.
Deciding who to vote for comes down to a couple of key issues.
I'm caring about the environment, to be honest, and economy too.
Thank you, appreciate it. At this advanced polling station, new Canadian Danny Ramadan is shocked at the number of people who don't bother to vote.
People in Syria, 400,000, 500,000 people died because they wanted the simple right of voting. And you don't want to take 10 minutes of your day to go down and vote in a place? That's privilege. And I would really encourage you to change that mindset.
A few minutes later,
wow, it really felt amazing. That was a moment to remember, I think.
So how excited are you to be able to vote for the first time in a Canadian election?
Amazing,
Another new Canadian voting for the first time, Mohammed Al-Saleh, who researched the party's positions on climate change, housing, and immigration.
As a former refugee, Canada's immigration policy is something that saved my life and is something that saved my family's life.
Inside the advanced poll, he receives his first secret ballot.
I'm voting for the first time ever.
And makes his mark.
Oh my God, this is amazing. I'm so happy. For the first time I see a ballot with different choices and I get to vote secretly and then cast my own vote into the box. This is amazing. Democracy is awesome and it's so empowering.
A power held by every Canadian, but with even more meaning for some. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Burnaby.
There's controversy in the literary world. Yesterday, Mark Atwood and Bernadine Evaristo were announced as co-winners of the Booker Prize. Why that decision to split the award is causing a rift after the break. It is one of the most prestigious literary awards, the Booker Prize, and today the decision to name 2 winners is being met with a bit of controversy. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson joins us with more on this now. We know Canadian Margaret Atwood is sharing the honor with Bernardine Evaristo, but not everyone's happy about that. Why?
That's right. So I have to admit that my initial reaction was great. 2 women, one a younger author, or first time a Black woman has won a Booker Prize. The other one, the oldest Booker winner ever, Margaret Atwood, who of course is having a bit of a rock star moment, but not everybody has been as happy with this decision. It all boils down to, what do you believe the Booker Prize should do? Should it reward the best book of the year in the English language? Here are the 2 authors who won. Or should it reward an author who is really great and needs the recognition, which nobody thinks Margaret Atwood does, including Margaret Atwood herself. In fact, she said that she would have been embarrassed had she won on her own. She's, of course, having a bit of a rock star moment. I mean, she's been an icon for so long, but I think that the TV show The Handmaid's Tale, and of course The Testaments, this book is a sequel to it, has really elevated her to the next level. And I think that led some people to say, listen, she really doesn't need it. She says herself she doesn't need it. Why not reward this young author who is very promising, who wrote this book as a narrative of multiple voices of Black British women, and really kind of, take a risk and reward somebody who is a fresh name. So let's see those tweets. We have Dr. Melinda Smith, who's actually a Canadian professor, who said women win awards as part of 2s and 3s. Evaristo is the first Black woman to win the Booker, and then she throws to the link acknowledging the win of these 2 women. So she means that, a lot of people have made a big point of the fact that this is a young woman, first time a Black woman has won it. Let's let her have the honor on her own. Let's look at another tweet here. Joe Venable, who was a sometime BBC writer, a cultural observer in the UK, he said, bewildered by the joint award of the Booker, seems dissatisfying for all concerned. Judging books is a qualitative, not a quantitative process. So the idea of a draw, i.e. literally inseparable books, makes no sense. If you can't choose between books, don't be a Booker judge. Or as one of our producers in the entertainment unit said, they don't give out 2 Stanley Cups, so...
But this is not the Stanley Cup. Anyway, this is not the first time.
It's more subjective, right?
Yes, and her name is out there. I'm going to buy Evaristo's book, and I wouldn't have heard of her before, unfortunately. This isn't the first time this has happened to a Canadian, though.
It sure hasn't. So I guess we're good at sharing, and we have an international reputation of being nice about sharing, because it was Michael Ondaatje, another huge Canadian name, who won back in 1992 and shared his prize. Actually, that was only the 2nd time in the history of the Bookers that had happened, this being the 3rd time. And since then, the rule was you cannot have 2 authors win. It has to boil down to 1. So actually this year, the jury also broke the rules. And by the way, the 2 women each take home about $40,000 Canadian. It's no big deal for Margaret Atwood, but people have said the younger author, Bernardine Evaristo, could have benefited more from both the publicity and the cash of this prize.
Hopefully folks will go out and read her book now.
Exactly. I think it's great publicity for both. They were both super gracious about this.
Yes, they were. It's the other people around it making the noise. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You might remember Monty the Python. He went missing the day the Raptors won their first NBA championship, and then the family thought they found him, but it was an imposter snake. I'm Tally Ricci, and coming up, we have the latest twist in the tale of Monty's adventures.
Do you remember Monty the Python? Well, the elusive snake involved in a case of mistaken identity has finally been solved, as the real Monty has been found. And as Talia Ricci explains, the sneaky snake was hiding out right under his family's nose.
My son went down to the basement to find something, and he screamed and came running up the stairs, "Snake, snake!"
Nose to nose with Monty the Python, a sight that surprised the entire family.
We had a hunting camera set up downstairs, so in case he moved around at night, the camera would take pictures of him so we could try to track him. We tried snake charmer music. So yeah, he was hiding in a cabinet in the basement.
The family almost gave up. They even threw out his frozen rats. And then a glimmer of hope. Back in July, someone called about a snake found in a nearby sewer grate. They thought it was Monty, but it was a different python.
Come on, Petey. Well, we named that snake Sneaky Pete. I was just sure that was Monty because I would be surprised if there were so many or another missing python in the neighborhood.
They had him for about a week, but had to give him back to Animal Services, who, by the way, have responded to 34 stray snake calls since 2017. When Monty was found, he was a little cold and hungry.
Has he lost weight since he's been...
He is smaller.
Fair enough. It's been 4 months since he's had a meal. But one snake expert tells us he's not surprised by Monty's survival skills.
They do go dormant. I'm sure he just sort of tucked away in a place, you know, and went dormant. And they don't expend much energy. They don't do much, therefore they don't eat much. And I always tell people just not to give up hope because they can be, you know, right beneath your nose.
How are you feeling that Monty has been reunited with the family once and for all?
Well, we're all happy. I'm very happy to know it's not loose in the house somewhere. We'll make sure that we get the cage locked so it won't escape again. It's likely moving to Guelph, though, because my son's at University of Guelph. So.
Starting the next chapter of this python story, Monty goes to school. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Keep the cages locked, folks. Thank you.
I'm going to stick with dogs.
Right? I don't get wearing it like...
their own, but I'll keep
wearing
a
it like
pet dog.
They're wearing it like a bracelet or a necklace, these things. Anyway. Yeah. So, stretch to the end of the week, but we've got to put up with some stuff before we get to that nice weekend, possibly.
Yeah, that's right. We do have to put up with a storm system moving in that's going to give us some heavy rain, and that's towards tomorrow morning. So just know that, and now's the time to plan. Set the alarm a little earlier. The morning commute could be a slow one. You also want to get the kids prepared for some heavier rain. It will be lighter and become showery activity into the afternoon, may even get some sunny breaks eventually, but it becomes windy as well. So the temperature barely changes, just a fluctuation of a couple of degrees kind of down and then up again. And then, yeah, Dwight, even into Thursday, still unsettled, and some windy northwesterly winds on that day. So a couple bad ones. Well, whatever.
As we say,
it's all relative.
This time of the year, could be snow. That's it for us tonight. Thank you for joining us. Mike Weiss has you covered at 11. Have a great night, everybody.